His paintings aren't gallery quality. We have standards to maintain. The words cut through the pristine silence of the Harrington Gallery like shattered glass. Camille Winters, the gallery director, made no attempt to lower her voice as she blocked the entrance of an elderly man clutching a worn leather portfolio. The gallery buzzed with pre-opening energy. White-gloved assistants carefully positioned small placards next to abstract sculptures. The smell of fresh paint and expensive perfume mingled in the air. Crystal champagne flutes stood in perfect formation on linen-draped tables, waiting for the city's elite art patrons to arrive for the evening's exclusive exhibition. James Calloway stood motionless at the threshold, his weathered face betraying no emotion. His faded navy jacket hung loosely on his thin frame, a stark contrast to the sleek black attire of the gallery staff. The portfolio he carried, bound with fraying leather straps, contained the artwork he'd been specifically invited to submit just 3 weeks ago. "There must be some mistake," James said quietly, his voice steady despite the public rejection. "I received an invitation to submit my work for consideration." He reached into his pocket, producing a crumpled letter on official gallery stationery. Camille barely glanced at the paper. Perhaps there was a miscommunication. "But looking at your collection, I can see immediately it's not the caliber we showcase." Her eyes flicked dismissively over his worn shoes and the small, almost unnoticeable pin on his lapel. The invitation must have been sent in error. Outside, the evening light cast long shadows across the street as black town cars began arriving. Women in elegant dresses and men in tailored suits stepped onto the sidewalk, making their way toward the gallery entrance. Several curious glances were cast toward the confrontation unfolding at the door. "I'd be happy to have someone direct you to a community center that might be more appropriate for your hobby art," Camille said, her smile tight and practiced. "Tonight is a curated event for serious collectors and established artists." James stood his ground, his calloused hands gripping the portfolio tighter. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding. My friend assured me that. I'm sorry, but I need to attend to our actual guests now," Camille interrupted, gesturing to an approaching couple in evening wear. "Martin, please escort this gentleman out." A security guard stepped forward, his expression uncomfortable but resolute as he prepared to remove the elderly man from the premises. James Calloway had never thought of himself as extraordinary. At 7'2", his 6-foot frame had begun to stoop slightly, shoulders rounded from years of hunching over canvases. Deep lines etched his sun-weathered face, each one a testament to the life he'd lived. His eyes, however, remained startlingly clear, piercing blue that seemed to take in everything while revealing nothing. The small pin on his lapel, easily overlooked unless you knew what to look for, was a distinguished service cross, though James never drew attention to it. His hands, now gripping the portfolio, bore the distinctive calluses of both artist and soldier, ridges along his trigger finger, paint permanently embedded in the creases of his knuckles. He'd spent 40 years trying to capture on canvas what words could never express, the nightmares that still woke him, the faces of the men he couldn't save, the beauty amid horror that only those who'd seen combat could truly understand. Art hadn't been a choice for James, it had been survival. Today, he wore his only suit jacket, navy blue, slightly frayed at the cuffs, over a crisp white shirt he'd ironed that morning. His shoes, though worn, had been polished to a military shine. For him, this gallery showing represented not personal glory but a chance to help other veterans find their voice through art. Across from him, Camille Winters exuded practiced superiority. At 35, she'd clawed her way to directorship of the Harrington Gallery through ruthless networking and an unerring eye for which artists would bring prestige. Her tailored black dress and statement jewelry were carefully selected to communicate authority while remaining in the background, the art world's uniform of choice. Camille's perfectly manicured nails tapped impatiently against her clipboard as she regarded the old man. She'd built her reputation on discovering fresh, edgy talent that appealed to wealthy collectors, not showcasing amateur work from sentimental veterans. In her mind, where art belonged in museums, not contemporary galleries where serious money changed hands. "I understand you feel you've been invited," she said, her tone suggesting she was speaking to a confused child rather than a grown man. "But there's simply been a mistake. Our submission process is quite rigorous." Several patrons had paused near the entrance, watching the interaction with uncomfortable curiosity. One woman in an expensive gown whispered something to her companion. both glancing repeatedly at James's worn portfolio. Martin, the security guard, hesitated. Unlike Camille, he noticed the military bearing in how the old man stood. Feet precisely shoulder-width apart, spine straight despite his years. The small pin on the lapel. The quiet dignity in his refusal to be humiliated. Comment, respect the hidden heroes among us if you believe we should honor veterans in all walks of life, not just on holidays or in parades. James looked down at his portfolio one last time before speaking. I think we both know there was no mistake in the invitation. A tense silence hung in the air. The security guard shifted uncomfortably, looking to Camille for further instructions. Martin, please escort Mr. She paused, realizing she hadn't bothered to ask his name. Calloway, James supplied quietly. James Calloway. And before your security removes me, perhaps you might at least look at what you're rejecting. He began to unfasten the worn leather straps of his portfolio. Camille sighed dramatically. Fine. One quick look, if only to clarify why this work isn't appropriate for our gallery. Her tone made it clear this was a concession made purely to avoid a scene. James carefully extracted a canvas, roughly 24 by 36 inches. He turned it to face Camille, revealing a haunting battlefield scene rendered in oils. The perspective was unusual, looking through a helicopter door at a rice paddy below. The technical skill was immediately apparent, the play of light on water, the distant smoke, the hands of a wounded soldier reaching upward. What made the painting extraordinary, however, was the emotion it conveyed. Fear, hope, and determination were all captured in that single frame. Several nearby patrons gasped audibly. A man in an expensive suit took an involuntary step forward for a better look. Camille's expression flickered momentarily before she regained her composure. Technically interesting, I suppose, but war imagery is hardly what our clientele is looking for. It's all rather distressing and dated. Art is meant to evoke emotion, Ms. Winters, James replied. Even uncomfortable ones. Our patrons prefer more contemporary subjects and techniques, she countered. The Vietnam War ended 50 years ago. We showcase forward-thinking artists. James carefully replaced the first painting and withdrew another. This one depicted a young Vietnamese girl offering water to an exhausted American soldier. The detail in their expressions was extraordinary, humanity cutting across the boundaries of language, culture, and war. More gallery visitors had gathered now, drawn by the confrontation but staying for the artwork. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the small crowd. Mr. Calloway, Camille said, her irritation growing, I appreciate your persistence, but as I explained, this isn't community art hour. We have important collectors arriving any minute. The letter you received was clearly an error. It wasn't an error, came a new voice. A gallery assistant had approached, looking nervous. Ms. Winters, he was on the approved list from the Arts Council liaison. I have the email confirmation. Camille's face flushed. Abigail, return to your duties immediately. I make the final decisions on exhibition pieces. But the special program. Abigail began before Camille cut her off with a glare. What special program? James asked quietly. Nothing that concerns you. Camille snapped. Then, regaining her professional demeanor, she added, listen, Mr. Calloway, your technical skills aren't in question. But this gallery has a certain aesthetic, a vision. Frankly, war memories from aging veterans simply don't align with our brand. The watching crowd had grown larger. A journalist who'd come to cover the opening was discreetly recording the exchange on her phone. I received a formal invitation, James persisted, his voice still calm but firmer now. Signed by the gallery board and the Cultural Affairs Division. I believe you're aware of exactly which program this is for. Camille's eyes narrowed. The Cultural Affairs Division? I don't know what you're talking about. Now, I've been more than patient, but this is becoming disruptive. She nodded to Martin. Please remove Mr. Calloway now. The security guard hesitated, his gaze moving from the paintings to James's lapel pin and back to Camille. Ma'am, I think. Now, Martin, Camille insisted. Or I'll find someone who can follow simple instructions. Outside, the sound of several vehicles pulling up at once caught everyone's attention. Through the gallery's floor-to-ceiling windows, a line of black SUVs with government plates could be seen stopping directly in front of the entrance. The gallery fell silent as four uniformed military personnel entered first, scanning the room with practiced efficiency. They positioned themselves at strategic points throughout the space, their posture alert but not threatening. Each wore the distinctive formal dress uniform of different military branches: Army, Air Force, Marines, and Navy, forming a united presence that commanded immediate respect. Behind them came a woman whose very presence altered the atmosphere of the room. Brigadier General Eleanor Hayes wore her dress blues with the kind of authority that came from 3 decades of military service. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled back in a perfect regulation bun, and the impressive array of decorations on her chest told a story of distinguished service. As Cultural Affairs Division Director for the Department of Defense, she rarely appeared in uniform at civilian functions. Tonight was clearly an exception. For more security, personnel followed her, creating a protective formation that made it immediately clear this was no ordinary visit. The gallery patrons instinctively stepped back, creating a path as General Hayes walked directly toward James Calloway. To everyone's astonishment, James straightened to his full height and rendered a perfect military salute. "General Hayes," he acknowledged quietly. "Stand at ease, Master Sergeant Calloway," she replied, returning his salute with precision before extending her hand. "It's an honor to see you again, sir." The gallery grew utterly silent as patrons watched this unexpected exchange. Camille Winters stood frozen, her expression cycling rapidly between confusion and alarm. "I trust you were just about to unveil Sergeant Calloway's exhibition?" General Hayes asked, her voice pleasant but carrying an unmistakable edge as she turned to face Camille. There must be some misunderstanding," Camille stammered. "We weren't aware that Mr. Calloway was part of any official, Master Sergeant," General Hayes corrected smoothly. "And there's no misunderstanding. The Harrington Gallery was selected 6 months ago for the inaugural exhibition of the Veterans Arts Initiative. Your board president signed the agreement personally." She nodded to an aide, who produced a folder containing official documents. "The Defense Department's Cultural Affairs Division has been coordinating with your staff for weeks." Another military aide stepped forward, carrying a sleek laptop. "We have all the correspondence, General, including Ms. Winters' confirmation of Master Sergeant Calloway's participation dated 3 weeks ago." The journalist who had been filming discreetly now moved closer, clearly sensing a significant story unfolding. "Perhaps," General Hayes continued, her voice carrying throughout the now silent gal. "Larry, you'd like to explain why one of the most significant living combat artists in America is being turned away from an exhibition specifically created to honor veteran artists?" Camille's face had drained of color. "There was a miscommunication about scheduling." "Interesting," the general interrupted, "because we have the delivery schedule confirmation signed by you personally." She turned to survey the gallery walls, where modern abstract pieces hung. "I see you've managed to hang other works." 2 more black SUVs pulled up outside, and a team of military personnel began unloading equipment. "General Hayes," James said quietly, "this isn't necessary. I can exhibit my work elsewhere." "No, Master Sergeant, it is absolutely necessary," she replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The Veterans Arts Initiative represents a $30 million investment in honoring the artistic contributions of our service members. The Harrington Gallery received a substantial grant to host this inaugural exhibition." She turned to address the gathering crowd directly. "Ladies and gentlemen, my apologies for the disruption. I'm Brigadier General Eleanor Hayes, Director of the Cultural Affairs Division. Tonight was meant to be the opening of a groundbreaking exhibition featuring works by distinguished veteran artists. It appears there's been a misunderstanding." One of her aides approached and whispered something in her ear. The general nodded before continuing. "I've just been informed that the Secretary of Defense is en route. He was particularly looking forward to seeing Master Sergeant Calloway's Vietnam series." The president expressed similar interest earlier today. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Camille looked as though she might faint. "Now," General Hayes continued, her tone shifting to one of unmistakable command, "we have exactly 1 hour to prepare this space as originally planned. My team will assist in the transition." She turned to face Camille directly. "Ms. Winters, I believe your services won't be required for the remainder of the evening." 2 military personnel escorted a visibly shaken Camille toward the back offices while others began carefully removing the currently displayed artwork. The operation proceeded with military precision, each piece cataloged, wrapped, and stored with meticulous care. The gallery patrons watched in stunned silence as James's paintings were brought in and displayed with equal precision. Each canvas was positioned according to what was clearly a pre-planned exhibition layout. The transformation of the space was remarkable. Within minutes, the stark modern pieces were replaced by James's powerful war-inspired works. For those unfamiliar with Master Sergeant Calloway's service record, General Hayes announced to the gathering crowd, "Allow me to provide some context for the artwork you're seeing." She nodded to an aide who projected a military photograph onto the gallery's main wall. It showed a much younger James Calloway in combat gear, sketchbook in hand, surrounded by fellow soldiers in Vietnam. Master Sergeant James Calloway served 3 tours in Vietnam with the 173rd Airborne Brigade. During his service, he was awarded the Silver Star, 3 Bronze Stars, and 2 Purple Hearts. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as the image changed to show James bandaged but still sketching from a hospital bed. On April 17, 1968, then Sergeant Calloway's unit came under heavy fire near Dak 2. Despite being wounded himself, he dragged 4 fellow soldiers to safety under continuous enemy fire. When medevac couldn't reach their position, he helped stabilize the wounded throughout the night, sketching their portraits so, in his words, their families would remember them as more than just casualties if they didn't make it home. James stood silently, his eyes fixed on the images from his past. All 4 of those men survived, the general continued. One of them is now Secretary of Defense Michael Harding, who will be joining us shortly. The crowd gasped collectively. The journalist was frantically taking notes while her cameraman continued filming. After returning home, Master Sergeant Calloway dedicated his life to documenting the human experience of war through art. His work has been quietly acquired by the National Gallery, the Smithsonian, and the Pentagon's permanent collection. The aide switched the projection to show James's paintings hanging in various prestigious locations, including one prominently displayed in the Oval Office. What few people know, General Hayes continued, is that for the past 30 years, Master Sergeant Calloway has anonymously funded art therapy programs for combat veterans across this country. The Veterans Arts Initiative, which this gallery was generously paid to host, is the public unveiling of his work alongside other veteran artists he has mentored. The crowd's attention shifted to an especially powerful painting now being hung in the center of the main wall. It depicted a helicopter dust-off mission, rendered with such emotional intensity that several viewers visibly teared up. This piece, the general explained, titled Coming Home, was recently appraised at $1.2 million. Master Sergeant Calloway has donated it to fund expansion of veterans' art therapy programs nationwide. James finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying throughout the now silent gallery. Art saved my life when I came home. It gives shape to experiences that have no words. Every veteran has a story that deserves to be told. Abigail, the gallery assistant who had tried to intervene earlier, approached General Hayes nervously. "General, I tried to prevent this situation. Ms. Winters instructed us to remove Sergeant Calloway from the approved list last week after seeing his photograph. She said his work wouldn't appeal to our collectors." "Thank you for your honesty," the general replied. "Your integrity is noted." The military team had now transformed the space entirely. James's artwork, along with pieces by several other veteran artists, created a powerful narrative throughout the gallery. Paintings, sculptures, and mixed media pieces told stories of service, sacrifice, and survival through art. The front doors opened again as a distinguished older man entered, flanked by security. Secretary of Defense Michael Harding moved directly to James, embracing him with obvious emotion. "It's been too long, old friend," the secretary said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your country has been waiting to honor your service, both on the battlefield and through your art." The exhibition opening proceeded that evening, though in a manner dramatically different from what had been originally planned. Camille Winters was nowhere to be seen, having been escorted from the premises by military personnel. In her place, Abigail was temporarily appointed as acting director for the event. News of the incident spread rapidly through social media. The journalist's video went viral within hours, amassing millions of views overnight. By morning, the story had been picked up by major news networks, with headlines celebrating the vindication of the veteran artist who had been initially rejected. Lines formed around the block the following day as people waited to view James's artwork. Many veterans came in uniform, rendering salutes as they entered the gallery. Art critics who had initially dismissed the exhibition as a government publicity stunt found themselves speechless before the raw power of the combat-inspired pieces. The Harrington Gallery Board of Directors issued a formal public apology to Master Sergeant Calloway and announced Camille Winters' permanent removal from her position. They pledged a significant donation to veterans' art therapy programs and established an annual exhibition space dedicated exclusively to veteran artists. 1 week after the opening, James returned to the gallery unannounced. He moved quietly among the visitors, listening to their reactions without identifying himself. An elderly Vietnam veteran stood weeping before the coming home painting, his wife's arm around his shoulders. "First time he's talked about the war in 50 years, she whispered to James, not knowing who he was. "Your painting gave him permission to remember." James nodded silently, understanding completely. Later that month, the Veterans Arts Initiative was expanded nationwide, with exhibitions planned in 30 major cities. Art therapy programs at VA hospitals received unprecedented funding, inspired by the publicity surrounding James's work and story. As for James himself, he returned to his modest studio apartment where he continued to paint daily. The fame and recognition meant little to him compared to the knowledge that his art was helping fellow veterans heal. Share this video if you believe we should never judge someone's worth by their appearance, and that our veterans deserve recognition in all aspects of society, not just for their service in uniform, but for the talents, wisdom, and gifts they continue to offer long after coming home.